Hello, 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 beautiful people. Welcome to part two of the pentavariant of pestilence. Again, the usual suspects. These are the usual suspects when it comes to chronic disease. As always, train your focus, like Sherlock Holmes. 99% of your success or failure in life will be contingent on your ability to focus on what is relevant to the exclusion of what is not relevant. Train that. So, obesity, 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 obesity. Obesity transforms our own cells into an internal threat by triggering inflammation. And explore how that happens in this PowerPoint. The extent of the health consequences of obesity are proportional to the degree of obesity. This makes sense because each fat cell becomes an individual contributor of inflammation, resulting in problems. So here we have some interesting facts on obesity. So 73% of white males, 69% of black males, 81% of Hispanic males, 60% of white women, 80% of black women, and 78% of Hispanic women are obese or overweight. Currently, that is a current statistic. The majority of people are overweight or obese. This is an issue. This is crazy. This is crazy. It is now abnormal to be of a normal, healthy body weight. And we're going to explore why this is becoming such an issue and why this is so prevalent and why it's so hard to do stuff about this in this video. Here we have Fat Bastard saying, I'm unhappy because I eat and I eat because I'm unhappy. This cycle that he is in mirrors the cycle of obesity because obesity itself becomes a risk factor for obesity, as we will soon see. So here we have some information on BMI, and BMI is the current metric used to define obesity, and there's some issues with that, and I want to go over those quickly. So BMI is simply a proportion of your body weight in pounds to your height in inches. That's literally no, height in feet, actually. It's literally just your body weight in pounds divided by your height in feet. Yeah, I don't know why that would be considered a good. I mean, for a lot of people, it is. For non-athletes, it is a good determinant of obesity, overweightness, etc. But for athletes, it doesn't really work, and here's why. So we have Yoel Romero in this photo at a body weight of 185 pounds, which he cut down to, by the way. He's naturally 205 pounds. So Yoel Romero would be walking around at an obese body weight of 205 at a height of 5'9", and here he's just overweight at a BMI of 27.3. But as you can see, he is clearly not overweight, clearly not obese. This dude is a monster. I had the same thing happen to me when I went to the doctor a few years ago. I was getting my weight checked by a nurse, and she said, your BMI is a little high, so that might be something you want to do something about. And I just take my shirt off, and I'm just completely shredded. And I'm like, are you sure? His jaw just drops. It's not, BMI is not a good indicator of obesity for athletes, but for the general population, it can be useful. However, I personally prefer the mirror method. I think it's the best method for determining whether or not you need to lose weight or what your body fat percentage even is. And you can just look in the mirror and basically say, like, well, which of these photos do I look more like if you're a male or a female? And that gives you a good understanding. I mean, really what we care about is the amount of fat you're carrying. We don't care about the ratio of your height and weight. Ultimately, we only care about that as it references the amount of fat you're carrying around. I mean, provided you're not taking tons of anabolic steroids and growth hormone and stuff, you're not going to be able to achieve an unhealthy body weight if you are lean. It's just not going to happen. So this is my favorite method. And yeah, just look in the mirror. If you like what you see, if you don't like what you see, these are all good indicators. Unless you have an eating disorder, body dysmorphia type thing, that can then become an issue in of itself. And I've definitely been there and many people I know have been there where look in the mirror and you're like, you look like this guy, and you think that you need to like look like this guy. You're like, it's just I'm not healthy. Like you're pinching the small amount of fat you have, and you're like, damn, I need to lose this fat. It's just it can become unhealthy, but generally speaking, how you look in the mirror is a good indicator of your body fat, provided you know some body dysmorphia or something. Though I never had an illusion as to how much fat I had. I wrestled. I mean, wrestling has itself been considered an eating disorder, but not that that's a reason not to do it. And yeah, I mean, cutting weight, that certain cultures, wrestling culture, dance culture, modeling culture, people are not necessarily encouraged to be unhealthily lean, but people who tend to have eating disorders can end up in those places. And then you can end up with a skewed culture of how one views their body. So that's just something to consider. But in general, BMI is not a good indicator of body fat. And provided you do not have body dysmorphia, looking in the mirror to judge your appearance is a very good way to see if you need to lose fat. Fat cells. Fat cells are called adipocytes. We need them to survive. They provide important signaling to our brain, to our body, to our thyroid to produce hormones and stuff. If you have too little fat, that will actually damage your hormone production through leptin signaling in the hypothalamus. One thing that many people experience if they try to maintain sub 10% body fat for too long is decreased hormone production. It's just a thing. Like all these many fitness influencers who maintain sub 10% body fat year round end up either using testosterone replacement therapy or developing thyroid issues, metabolic issues, various issues related to hormones. Because if you just don't have any fat, if you're just completely, if you're this guy, if you're these two guys year round, your body thinks it's starving to death and as such cuts off your production of sex hormones. Also cause joint issues, brain issues. The brain is made of fat. Bodybuilders have experienced issues dropping below 3-4% body fat, drop like 2-1% body fat, you can die even simply because your brain doesn't have enough fat to function. So fat is essential, but fat cells can undergo a negative transformation from being little happy fat cells to inflamed fat cells that are causing problems. And as we see that right here, and as we see, insulin resistance and obesity is one of the chains linking to the inflammation oxidative stress system causing chronic disease. And here we see neurodegeneration, accelerated aging, literally like all dysfunction in the body is worsened and contributed to by inflammation and oxidative stress. So in some sense, they cause everything. So that's why many times I will list all of the end causes. Like obesity leads to blah, blah, blah. Obesity leads to everything. Anything that creates inflammation and oxidative stress leads to every negative effect of the body. There's no laser targeting for disease. Disease is just widespread dysfunction. And you can't have laser targeted symptoms, such as in the case of type 1 diabetes, where the pancreas is destroyed in an autoimmune reaction. But that is because of broader dysfunction in the body. It's never just the pancreas destroying itself for no reason. That doesn't happen. It happens as a result of broader dysfunction, and the pancreas, that is simply the weakest link where the chain breaks. The chain will always break at its weakest link first, but if the chain is breaking, it's not the issue of the weakest link, it's the issue of the overwhelmed chain. So onward. So here we have some more information about fat cells. Fat cells store excess energy in the form of triglycerides. When functioning properly, they secrete a hormone called adipodectin. This hormone decreases inflammation, increases insulin sensitivity, and increases fat burning. That's awesome. When fat cells grow beyond their natural storage capacity, they trigger an immune response that blocks the release of adiponectin. Visceral fat, the beer belly, hard fat that surrounds your internal organs, is the worst kind and most inflammatory kind of fat. That's the kind of fat you don't want. A little chub on your belly is not an issue, but having a constantly like that swollen beer belly look, people will be like, oh, it's rock hard, and they'll be happy about that. Very bad. That is the worst kind of fat. Macrophages, which just simply means large eaters, eat as they're part of the innate immune system. They will attack and eat fat cells, killing them, causing more inflammation when the fat cells become dysregulated. And all this inflammation, both released by the immune system in response to the fat cell, caused by the destruction of the fat cell, and caused by the byproducts of insulin resistance caused by the overly excessively large fat cell. All of this inflammation also fuels obesity. So Fat Bastard was half right. Being fat also makes him fat. So the state of his body fuels his desire to eat and also fuels the conditions that make his eating disproportionately make him fat. So it is really a vicious cycle on many, many levels, not simply psychologically. And obese people also grow more fat cells to keep inflammatory palmitate out of the bloodstream. Palmitate is the worst saturated fat. It is incredibly inflammatory, causes many, many, many issues. It is made by the metabolism of glucose into fat. And because it's so inflammatory, our body needs to keep it out of the bloodstream. And it does that by increasing the number of fat cells you have, because when we have these fat cells becoming over bloated, they start releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream because they just can't hold them in. These fatty acids, palmitate being the primary one, causes all these issues. So the body creates more fat cells to store that. These fat cells also create more hunger signaling, which then fuels the desire to consume, making us fatter, causing more issues. The cycle continues. Diabesity. $245 billion are spent annually in diabesity, and it is increasing very rapidly. By 2050, if the trend continues, 1/3 of adults will be diabetic. That's crazy. Type 2 diabetes is the result of epigenetic changes and inflammation breaks down the insulin receptor, meaning that inflammation is a cause of type 2 diabetes. So here we have the insulin receptor, and here we have the excessively large fat cell producing inflammation that damages the receptor, preventing glucose from being brought into the cell. When glucose can no longer be brought into the cell, that glucose continues to circulate in the bloodstream, both triggering the growth of new fat cells and triggering the release of more insulin, causing even more insulin resistance by the pancreas. This over time will eventually lead to the pancreas losing the ability to produce insulin and worsening the problem. I mean, it really is a vicious cycle where all the systems involved begin to break down. Excessively large fat cells shut off their own ability to intake sugar to prevent overworked mitochondria from producing more free radicals and thus inflammation. And this produces more insulin resistance. Those are the two pathways we currently know about. Is inflammation itself producing insulin resistance, but then also the cells mitochondria. So this is inflammation on the outside. This is inflammation on the inside. So inflammation on the inside of the cell is the byproduct of mitochondria breaking down excess amounts of food, triggers the insulin receptor to stop working, stop imputing more glucose, but also inflammation on the outside does the same thing. And when we have this insulin resistance happening, there's many, many negative byproducts and consequences of that. So once insulin resistance is taken hold, the fat cells no longer have insulin to prevent the breakdown of fat. So insulin triggers fat. Insulin when it hits the fat cell triggers the cell to preserve fat and then intake sugar and nutrients into the fat cell. when insulin does not signal the fat cell properly, the cell doesn't really know what to do with the fat. So it starts releasing the fat into the bloodstream, which the liver then transforms into triglycerides. And then they end up being accumulated in the liver, producing fatty liver. This is really bad because fatty liver hurts liver function, and the liver is the primary generator of enzymes in the body. We need enzymes for literally everything, and this creates more stress, more problems, more dysfunction. So that is very bad. Also, insulin resistance triggers the liver to produce more glucose to help with the body's overstressed state, causing more insulin to be released by the pancreas, causing greater insulin resistance and causing the problem to get even worse. Also causing fat cells to turn that glucose into palmitate and then release that palmitate into the bloodstream, causing inflammation and causing the creation of new fat cells to take in the palmitate. You can see how this cascading effect is horrible. Insulin resistance also causes muscle wasting because the muscle can no longer intake nutrients. We also need muscle to intake sugar to alleviate the blood sugar response. Muscle is the primary blunting force in blood sugar response because muscle takes in a lot of sugar. Also, why having a lot of muscle is very good for your metabolism because it prevents excess sugar from building up in your bloodstream and is just generally, it's metabolically active and it's generally very useful. Muscle mass is one of the greatest predictors of lifetime longevity. So build that muscle. But also, yeah, palmitate is even worse too because it also triggers the inflammation in the hypothalamus, which disrupts the HPA axis, disrupting the gut, disrupting everything. So if you're curious about the HPA axis, go back to the PowerPoint talking about the HPA axis, but palmitate causes inflammation of the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, disrupting the HPA axis as well. Fat cells also produce an enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen. Testosterone being needed to produce muscle. It's very metabolically active for men, and decreasing testosterone just furthers the issue. I mean, more estrogen means more fat, lower testosterone means less muscle. Yeah, once this cycle starts going, it is hard to pull out of and very, very problematic. Also, because fat cells, ah, fat cells know to, oh, whoop. Fat cells know to stop producing, to stop, so fat cells, when they are satisfied, produce leptin. Leptin signals the brain to stop eating, specifically the hypothalamus. And when we have excessive inflammation, poor sleep, oxidative stress, too much leptin released by large cells, large fat cells release excessive amounts of leptin. We have too much leptin and then inflammation causing us to become leptin intolerant. Also, the excessive amounts of leptin do cause leptin intolerance too. So inflammation and leptin in excess both cause leptin intolerance. This means that the hypothalamus is not getting the leptin signaling that it needs to produce sex hormones, produce proper thyroid hormones, produce all these things. And your body will actually think it is starving when it has excess calories, excess nutrients, excess fat, because leptin signaling has been disrupted. Improper leptin signaling is necessary, is a major cause for infertility in women and improper sex hormone functioning in men. Again, because it disrupts the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is one of the main regulators for the body. Again, the hypothalamus triggers the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland regulates the release of all hormones across all glands in the body. And the hypothalamus is directly attacked by both palmitate in the blood and leptin resistance, both of which are a byproduct of obesity and inflammation. So, yeah, being fat, having visceral fat, all of these things are major, major risk factors and major contributors to obesity. Well, obviously obesity, but oxidative stress and inflammation. That is it for now. Tune in for the next video.